this segment, we're going to use the interactive tools and work with images. I'll activate the whiteboard mode in the Easy Interactive Tools. In this example, I'll import an image and use that image to activate prior knowledge with my students. I expect them to have some information about the image, but now I'm going to get them to look a little deeper into the image. So I'll click on the Insert Image icon and then choose from File. I want to use my shark image here, so I can click once and choose Open, or I can double click that image as well. Now the image loads in the center of my screen. I'll use the Select tool. I can move the image around if I'd like. I can grab a corner and make it large or make it small. I'm going to put it about right here. I want them to analyze the image, so I'm going to give them some directions. I'll use my pen tool. I'll check my size here. I like that. I'm going to write in red. And I'll come over here and write I see. And then I'll write I know. And then I wonder. I like to give some defined areas for my students. So I'll use the straight line tool and I'll draw a box for them, draw an area to kind of help them out. So I'll give a nice straight line across, then some areas to kind of help my students as they write. Now, my students can come up one at a time, or if you have dual pens, you can have two students engaged, handing off the pen to the next student, and they can come in, actually choose their own color. So maybe you have teams, and students can then write what they see, what they know, and what they wonder. Of course, I just did that backwards. I can also annotate on top of my image as well. So I could, as a teacher, I could ask, well, what do I see? What do I know? What do I wonder about a very specific area? So a very helpful tool. Another way to engage students is with the magnifier. I'm going to add a page here, go back to my images, and I'm going to bring in an image of a butterfly as well as that caterpillar, that butterfly before he turns into a butterfly. I'll use my tools again. In this case, I want to place my images like this and then give my students again a place to write. And this time I'll use a different technique. I'll have students write in this box for observations and this box for observations as they see fit. But what I'd also like to show you is the use of the magnifier tool. I come down to magnifier. When I click on magnifier, I can move this image over, and my students can now look a little closer at that image. And then I'll move over and then another image. So features on one image and compare or contrast to features on another image. Again, students can then write, identify what they have seen, in each box. I can actually again do this in dual pin mode. So students on the left side of the room could look at one, students on the right side of the room could look at another. In this next example of using images, I want to highlight the layering feature. And this little short activity, I want my students to look at a process. So I'm going to bring in some images that I've already selected, in this case, for a frog. Now, with the layering feature, the images literally are layered back to front as I bring them in. So I'm not going to bring in my images in a very specific order. I'm going to bring them in a random order. I know that our tadpole, our frog, starts out as a tadpole, so I'm not going to bring him in first. I'll bring in different stages of that development. Let's bring in the tadpole and the froglet. And I know for my students that I really do want the frog as the top image. So again, I'll use my select tool. I want to move these images down, make them a little smaller so it's easier for me to manipulate in this particular activity. Very easy to set this up. And then I'm going to place them right here in the middle. Now you can do this with any set of images. I now want my students to have a framework to work with this. So I will use my shapes, use my rectangle tool. I'll go back to my black pen. And I'm going to give my students a place where they can begin to see a process and evaluate a process. My pen, let's go with 1, 2, 3, 4, or however you want to identify that. Again, I think I would like to change my ink to a different color very quickly and help them out, letting them see how that process works. Now my students are ready for this activity. Where is the frog? Well, that stage is here. Now I have to begin to evaluate. Oh, okay, well, I believe this goes here. Yes, here we go. And now I have set the order of development for my frog. So again, that interactive piece, students handing off the pen, coming up to the board, engaged, actively engaged in a lesson. This next example was taught to me as and called colorful writing. I'm going to create a new page. And I'm going to use the background feature. Now this has a very unique piece in that when I make a background, I'll choose anything right now if I'm using math. If I make a background, I can draw all over that background. If I'm doing a math lesson or I want to draw shapes, I can actually go in and draw, and then when I realize or if I see that I made a mistake, I can just erase and my background stays fixed. So using that same feature, I'm going to add a slide and then set my background. And I used my tools earlier to take a screenshot of some text. I open that up and set now the text as my background. Now I can go in with my students using the highlighter pen. I'll check the color, and I can determine this however I want, but I can have my students analyze this text either and make notes if we'd like to annotate on that, and that's an excellent way to use this. But my colorful writing example, I'll have students come in and identify all the nouns. Now they're at the board, they're actively engaged. I decide in my class if I just want them to find one noun, or each student gets to find two, or one student identifying nouns and another student identifying verbs. Changing those colors as the different parts of speech, and you can see where that colorful writing begins to develop. All of a sudden I have all of my writing that is then marked so I can analyze this. I can also, using that save feature, I'll come back, I'll save this background. It'll save as an image. I'll just abbreviate CW for colorful writing. Save it as a JPEG. And this is actually the process where we stopped. This is the point where we stopped in our lesson. So if I want to come back tomorrow, I add a new page, add a background, go to my file, open my file, and I can begin where I left off yesterday, choosing another color and building that over a period of time. That's just a few of the ways that we can use the interactive projector using images to engage our students.